So, as you learned, the Heian court was a real distractor for both the emperor and for many of the nobles who were supposed to be out ruling different parts of Japan and maintaining order. And as a result, Japan sort of fell into chaos, and that led to the growth of a military society. Japan's largest landowners were known as daimyo, and since the emperor was not really providing any leadership, they decided they needed to take matters into their own hands to protect their property. So they ended up hiring large armies of trained warriors known as samurai who were able to protect the land of the daimyo. And then the samurai, in turn, they would pledge loyalty to the daimyo, but they would also get something back, and that would either be pay, or in many cases, the daimyo didn't necessarily have a lot of money to give to the samurai. So sometimes the samurai would be paid in either rice that he could sell or in land that he could then, have his own peasants cultivate and then have his own food to either eat or sell. Now, because of the preoccupation of the Heian court with life in Heian, not only did the daimyo have to try to kind of manage things on their own, but there were a lot of families that were sort of struggling for power outside of the capital. And this led to a period in Japan in like the 12th century of lengthy civil war. And a couple of families sort of got stronger than the others and started fighting each other. And the family that in the end won was the Minamoto clan, and they ended up sort of taking over the country because they didn't just want to take over their area. They were really fed up with the emperor not doing anything, so they decided that they were going to rule instead of the emperor and just keep the emperor as a figurehead. So that's what they did. The Minamoto leader was supposed to be loyal to the emperor because he himself was a samurai, so he took the title of shogun, and a shogun was a person who would rule, a military leader who would rule in the emperor's name. Now, samurai had a certain code that they were supposed to follow. They were highly trained and usually came from noble families, but there was a strict code of conduct or rules called Bushido that they were supposed to follow. It was similar to the code of chivalry that European knights of the same era were supposed to follow. And that code included several different characteristics, including justice, courage, benevolence, politeness, honor, loyalty, self-control, and sincerity. And basically, the samurai were supposed to be brave and honorable fighters, and they were expected to live simple, disciplined lives that would make them better warriors. And many of them got really interested in Zen Buddhism because of its emphasis on self-discipline. And probably the most important of these characteristics for samurai was loyalty. A samurai was supposed to be loyal to his lord. And if a samurai lost his lord, in some cases, it was considered better to lose his own life than live with the shame or dishonor. So, for example, if the lord the samurai was dishonored in some way, or if the samurai disobeyed an order, samurai was expected to commit suicide rather than live with kind of the shame of having let his lord down in some way. Now, after the shoguns took control, there were still a lot of challenges to the authority of the shoguns. First of all, there were the Mongols, led by Kublai Khan, who tried to invade Japan 2 separate times. And both times, a huge storm came up and actually wiped out most of the Mongol navy, thus saving Japan from invasion. The Japanese ended up calling these storms kamikazes, which means divine wind, and that was because they believed that the gods had sent the storms in order to protect Japan. However, all of the gearing up for invasion was expensive, and a lot of the nobles were left unhappy, thinking that the shogun wasn't really treating them fairly. So that ended up leading to new rebellion. And the emperor, who was tired of not having any say in the government, ended up fighting back against some of the shoguns. And so by the 1400s, so from the 12th to the 1400s, there was this period where there was a lot of disunity and fighting between the emperors and the shoguns. And during that time, the shoguns lost most of their authority, which the emperor didn't really absorb himself. It really just led to, again, disunity and civil war and a lot of fragmentation within Japan. Finally, in the 1500s, there were people who were able to start reunifying Japan. And the first one was a man named Oda Nobunaga, and he was able to arm his soldiers with guns that came in with Portuguese traders. And this was the first time guns were used in Japan. And so since Oda Nobunaga's side had the guns and the other side didn't, he won pretty handily. Then when he died, other leaders continued to reunify Japan. And then the one who's given the credit for fully reunifying Japan and creating a long period of stability was a guy named Tokugawa Ieyasu. And he became the shogun in 1603 and had the capital at Edo, which is now Tokyo. And he started a period known as the Tokugawa shogunate. And his shogunate, his family, ruled all the way until 1868, so over 250 years of relative peace and stability. But one of the things that the Tokugawas did is they actually closed Japan off to the rest of the world and refused to allow people to come in and trade and settle there, and that was a way that they sort of protected Japan from outside influences. The crest that you see in the background here is actually the Tokugawa family crest. So Japan's rulers also banned guns because they were worried that peasants would get their hands on them and possibly defeat samurai armies. And this also led to a very limited technology period in Japan where they started to sort of fall behind the rest of the world. And it wasn't until 1868 when the U.S. Navy sailed into Edo Harbor and sort of forced the Japanese government to open its doors to the West that this period of isolation ended.